Do you ever catch yourself seeking approval from everyone around you, even strangers? Do you find yourself in relationships where you're constantly trying to prove you're worthy of love? Here's a question that might make you uncomfortable. What if the person holding you back isn't someone in your life right now, but an invisible figure living in your unconscious mind? What if I told you that many of your deepest struggles, your fear of rejection, your need to please others, your inability to set boundaries, aren't really about the present moment at all? They're echoes from your earliest relationships, patterns carved so deep into your psyche that they feel like truth itself. Today, we're going to explore something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. We're going to look at how the relationship with your mother, or the absence of that relationship, continues to shape every decision you make, every relationship you enter, and every way you treat yourself. And more importantly, we're going to discover how recognizing this invisible influence can finally set you free. There's a psychological concept that explains why so many of us feel trapped in patterns we can't break, why we repeat the same relationship mistakes, why we struggle with self-worth no matter how much we achieve. It's called the mother complex. And before you roll your eyes thinking this is just blame your parents' psychology, let me be clear, this isn't about pointing fingers. The mother complex isn't about your actual mother as a person. It's about the internal blueprint that was formed in your earliest years, a psychological imprint that continues to operate in your adult life, often completely outside your awareness. Think of it as emotional software running in the background of your mind, influencing how you see yourself, how you relate to others, and what you believe you deserve. Here's why this matters more than ever in our modern world. We live in a time of unprecedented freedom to choose our paths, our relationships, our identities. Yet, so many people feel more lost and disconnected than previous generations. We have access to endless self-help resources, therapy options, and personal development tools, but the same core wounds keep surfacing. The reason, we're treating symptoms while the root system remains untouched. We're trying to build healthy relationships on a foundation of unexamined childhood patterns. We're seeking external validation to fill internal voids that were created decades ago. The mother complex affects everyone, regardless of whether you had a loving mother, an absent one, an overbearing one, or a neglectful one, because this isn't really about her. It's about what your developing psyche made of those early experiences, and how those interpretations became the lens through which you see the world. In the next few minutes, we're going to dive deep into how these invisible patterns work, why they're so difficult to break, and most importantly, how recognizing them can become the key to your emotional freedom. This isn't comfortable territory, but it's necessary territory if you want to stop living your life on autopilot. The invisible prison. Let's start with something that might shock you. You're not relating to the people in your life. You're relating to ghosts. Every time you interact with a boss, a romantic partner, a friend, part of your unconscious mind is seeing them through the filter of your earliest relationships. Think about it this way. Imagine you're wearing tinted glasses that you put on so early in life that you forgot you were wearing them. Everything you see is colored by those lenses, but you assume that's just how the world looks. The mother complex is like those glasses, except instead of changing colors, it changes how you interpret emotions, intentions, and relationships. Here's a real-world example. Sarah, a successful marketing executive, finds herself constantly over-explaining her decisions at work. She stays late, sends unnecessary follow-up emails, and feels anxious whenever her boss doesn't respond immediately. She thinks this is just her being professional, but what's really happening is much deeper. Sarah's mother was chronically anxious and would withdraw emotionally whenever Sarah made mistakes as a child. Now, 30 years later, Sarah's nervous system still interprets any potential disappointment from authority figures as a threat to her emotional survival. She's not just managing a work relationship, she's unconsciously trying to prevent the emotional abandonment she learned to fear as a child. This is how the mother complex operates. It's not dramatic or obvious, it's subtle, persistent, and it feels completely normal because it's been with you for so long. The myth versus the person. Here's where things get really interesting and possibly uncomfortable. The mother who lives in your psyche isn't your actual mother. It's a psychological construction, part memory, part projection, part archetypal energy that may have very little to do with the real person who raised you. You might have a loving, supportive mother, but if you were a sensitive child who needed more reassurance than she naturally gave, your psyche might have constructed an image of an emotionally unavailable mother. Conversely, you might have a genuinely difficult mother, but your psyche might have created an idealized version to cope with that reality. This is why simply understanding your childhood rationally doesn't automatically heal these patterns. You're not dealing with facts, you're dealing with the emotional truth that a child's mind created to make sense of complex situations. Let me give you another example. David grew up with a mother who sacrificed everything for her family. She worked multiple jobs, never spent money on herself, and constantly put everyone else's needs first. David learned that love equals self-sacrifice. Now as an adult, he can't say no to anyone. He's exhausted, resentful, and confused about why people seem to take advantage of his kindness. The kicker? His mother never asked him to live this way. In fact, she probably wanted better for him. But David's psyche absorbed the message that his worth was tied to how much he could give up for others. He's living out a pattern that was never consciously taught, but was emotionally transmitted. This brings us to one of the most devastating aspects of the mother complex: unconscious loyalty. There's a part of your psyche that believes that if you become happier, more successful, or more fulfilled than your mother was, you're somehow betraying her. This isn't logical, it's emotional. It's a primitive part of your psyche that equates your growth with abandoning the person who gave you life. So you unconsciously limit yourself. You sabotage relationships when they get too good. You stop yourself just short of major breakthroughs. You create problems to match the level of struggle you witnessed growing up. Maria is a brilliant artist who's been almost ready to launch her career for 5 years. Every time she gets close to a major opportunity, something goes wrong. She gets sick, she creates drama in her personal life, or she suddenly decides her work isn't good enough. What Maria doesn't realize is that her mother was also artistic, but gave up her dreams to raise her family. Deep down, Maria believes that pursuing her art fully would be a betrayal of her mother's sacrifice. This invisible loyalty can show up in countless ways: staying in careers that drain you because your mother never had choices, accepting poor treatment because your mother modeled that love requires endurance, or feeling guilty when good things happen because your mother struggled with depression.
The inner critic's true voice. Now, let's talk about something even more insidious: how the mother complex expresses itself through your inner voice. That critical, demanding, never satisfied voice in your head? It's often not your voice at all. It's an internalized version of the emotional atmosphere you grew up in. Maybe your mother was explicitly critical. Maybe she was anxious and you absorbed her worry as self-doubt. Maybe she was depressed and you internalized her sadness as a belief that you're somehow not enough to make people happy. Or maybe she was overwhelmed and you learned that your needs were a burden. Here's what's particularly cruel about this: you've become your own worst enemy at using someone else's script. You push yourself harder than you'd push anyone else. You deny yourself rest, comfort, or compassion. You've essentially taken over the job of keeping yourself small, controlled, and acceptable. Jake realizes this pattern when he notices that every time he's proud of an achievement, a voice in his head immediately points out what he could have done better. It sounds like his mother's anxious perfectionism, but it's coming from inside his own mind now. He's carrying her anxiety about not being good enough, and it's preventing him from enjoying any of his successes. The path to freedom. So, how do you break free from patterns that feel as natural as breathing? The first step is radical honesty about what you're actually responding to in present moment situations. When you feel that familiar surge of anxiety about someone's approval, ask yourself, who am I really trying to please right now? The person in front of me or the mother figure in my psyche? When you catch yourself in people-pleasing mode, pause and consider, what would happen if I disappointed this person? What am I really afraid of losing? The goal isn't to blame your mother or cut off your relationship with her. The goal is to separate your adult self from the child who learned to navigate the world through her emotional landscape. You want to develop what psychologists call earned security. the ability to provide for yourself the emotional stability that may have been inconsistent in your early years. This means learning to be your own source of validation, comfort, and encouragement. It means recognizing when you're operating from old patterns versus responding to current reality. And it means gradually taking back the power you unconsciously gave to an internal figure who may not even exist anymore. The most profound part of this work, when you stop trying to heal your relationship with the mother in your psyche and start building a healthy relationship with yourself, something magical happens. You stop attracting situations and people that recreate old dramas. You stop needing others to be different than they are. You become genuinely free to love and be loved without the invisible strings of old wounds pulling you back into familiar but painful patterns. So here's what we've uncovered today. The patterns that feel most like just who you are might actually be psychological inheritances from your earliest relationships. The voice that criticizes you, the ways you seek approval, the relationships you choose. Much of this might not even be authentically yours. But here's the liberating truth. Once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. And once you can't unsee them, you have a choice. You can continue living them out unconsciously, or you can begin the work of creating new responses. This isn't about perfection or completely erasing your past. It's about becoming the conscious author of your adult life, instead of the unconscious actor in childhood scripts. It's about treating yourself with the compassion you always deserved and becoming your own source of the emotional security you may have never received. The mother complex doesn't disappear overnight, but your relationship with it can transform completely. Instead of being controlled by invisible patterns, you can recognize them, understand them, and choose differently. That's not just healing, that's genuine freedom. Here's your practical starting point. For the next week, pay attention to your internal dialogue. When you catch yourself being harsh, demanding, or critical with yourself, pause and ask, whose voice is this really? What would it sound like if I spoke to myself the way I'd speak to someone I truly cared about? That simple practice can begin to shift decades of unconscious programming, because the relationship you have with yourself sets the template for every other relationship in your life. If this video resonated with something deep inside you, if it helped you recognize patterns you've been living unconsciously, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share one pattern you recognized in yourself. It could be people-pleasing, difficulty with boundaries, fear of disappointing others, or anything else that clicked for you. Your story matters, and sharing it helps others realize they're not alone in these struggles. Sometimes reading someone else's experience is exactly what another person needs to begin their own journey of recognition and healing. If you found value in exploring these deeper psychological patterns, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We dive into uncomfortable but transformational topics here, the kind of insights that can genuinely change how you understand yourself and your relationships. And here's something I want you to try right now. Before you move on to your next video, take 30 seconds to check in with yourself. How are you feeling after absorbing this information? What emotions are coming up? Don't judge whatever you're experiencing, just notice it. That simple act of self-awareness is the beginning of the very transformation we've been talking about. Remember, the goal isn't to fix yourself. You were never broken. The goal is to free yourself from patterns that no longer serve you and to reclaim the authentic life that's been waiting for you to discover it.